And we have one more area of the curriculum we want to look at. We know that, again, the only three that need to go in order are the community building, main idea, and summarizing. So we've covered that. We've given you lots of ideas about community building. We've given you lots of ideas about main idea and summarizing. And if you know that students really have that down solid, then the other comprehension skills are not nearly as difficult for them. Inferencing, though, is one of the probably most difficult reading strategy skills. So we saved that for last because we want to give you some very simple break it down strategies. So if you turn to page 4 of your reading curriculum, we have the inferencing section, and I am going to do something called the trash game. You can call it whatever you want to, but it's basically with an authentic object. So I use this scenario, and again, I'm going back to that launching sequence. I'm going to start with some very concrete objects. I'm not even going to have text. Some of them don't even have text on them. But I get students to go back and think about, okay, how do I infer? How do we do that? So I tell them, and I get in this scenario and I did it with 5th graders this last year, I have these neighbors. I just moved into a new neighborhood. I have neighbors that I go by their house, and sometimes the garage door's open, and sometimes it's closed, and sometimes the light's on, and sometimes the lights are off, but I never see anyone. I never see anyone out mowing the lawn. I never see them taking their trash out. I haven't seen them backing out of their garage, and so I've been really curious, who lives in that house? And so I told the 5th graders, so this morning when I was backing out of my driveway, I did something. It was trash day, and I grabbed a bag of their trash and I brought it with me to school. And I need you guys to be the detectives to help me find out something about my neighbors based on what we can find in their trash. This is kind of like a CSI kind of thing, you know, because on CSI they have to look for evidence and find evidence, but they also are using things that they know from their training. They're using their schema. That's a big word, but basically that just means what I already know in my schema. And I'm going to use evidence, and I'm going to put those two things together to come up with some kind of an inference. So I'm going to do the first one. There's nothing icky in here. I promise you I looked through here and made sure that there wasn't any rotten potatoes or anything. Okay, I'm pulling this out. And I'm going to get a Post-it note because I know scientists have to label their evidence. And when they're on CSI, they're always labeling their evidence and putting it in a plastic bag and sealing it and all of that. Okay, so I've got a Post-it note. I'm going to start with some evidence. Okay, I'm reading the text on the box. It says Lantis Solar Star. There's some kind of a thing that looks like a pen to me, so that's part of my prior knowledge. And I'm reading that it says insulin 100 units. Okay, that makes me think right off the bat that this is some kind of medication because I know that medication comes in units. So I'm going to put down that it looks like a pen, medication. All right. And it says for subcutaneous injection only. Okay. And it says use within 28 days after opening, needles not included. Oh, that backs up my evidence that I'm finding. There's something about needles. So I'm going to have an injection. There's the word needles. I know that some medication has to be, can only be used so long, and since it says use within 28 days, it's probably backs up my medication thing. So I've got a lot of evidence here and some schema, and I've just written that down. I've got pen, medication, plus 28 days, and then I added the injection and the needles on here, and I'm going to see if I can come up with some kind of an inference. Okay, insulin. I'm going to go back to that word insulin. I've heard of that before, and I know that people with diabetes have to do something with insulin, okay? So I'm going to make an inference based on what I previously know and the text evidence that I found that someone in the house or someone visiting has diabetes. Okay? So I haven't just guessed. I've got some pretty solid evidence that I can go back to based on this, and I can really spend some time modeling this for students, looking at the inserts inside, looking for more text evidence. But basically, you walk through, okay, now I'm going to give each partner group a piece of trash, and you're going to do the same thing. Take a Post-it note, what's your schema, and what's the evidence, and then what inference can you make based on that. Let's see. You two can look at that piece. All right, so with your partner, take a minute, just a minute. I'm going to have you share, and again, make sure on your Post-it note, your evidence, that you have the schema, whatever you've used from your background knowledge, plus the evidence, the text clues, and then you have built an inference off of that. And again, having this up for students to follow and refer back to. You can break it down into a formula like this, where you put PK for prior knowledge plus text clues equals I for inference. However it works best for your students. But I'm going to have you share with your partner what you came up with for your inference formula. Does partner here like to start?
All right, let's see. We have a magazine. It's a travel magazine. At some point, someone had the subscription because the address label has been removed. And it is a budget travel, so we know that that means that they are frugal, perhaps lower socioeconomic abilities. So we came to we made the inference that they are people who like to travel without spending too much money. And maybe they do their homework first. They're frugal.
All right.
Fight over it now.
We have a part of an airline ticket. So we said that, the fact is we have a part of an airline ticket. It's from Southwest Airlines. And there's a section that says pet travel rules. So the inference we're making is that this individual or someone in the household traveled on Southwest Airlines with a pet.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so you can see how, again, this was very engaging for students. I had a whole bag of trash so the whole small group could participate. I modeled it for them. They practiced it with a partner. And then together we talked about, okay, now what do we think when we put all this together? What inference can we come up with about my neighbors? And so helping them understand that's the difference between a prediction and an inference. When you make a prediction, then you can either prove or disprove it in the text by reading further. With an inference, you really are reading between the lines, okay? But it's based on solid evidence. So it's not just taking a random guess. You're making an educated guess or an educated prediction, basically, about whatever it is you're inferring about. Tiffany has done this several different ways, but this was a very basic way to start without even really having text. I mean, you've got some objects you're looking at. I've seen a history teacher use artifacts from the time in history that they were going to be introducing, and they started with those and passed those around and had students examine them. What do you think this might be? What time period do you think this might be from? And all of that. And then they came up with some kind of an inference about who might have used these. I've seen people do it with a shoe, bring an old shoe in. Who might have walked in this shoe? Who might have worn this shoe? What do you think they did? What time period did they live in? So lots of different ways you can start with a very concrete object.